My last video was all about summarizing my thoughts going through a piece called The Man I Love by Gershwin. And I love that piece, but one comment in particular kind of piqued my interest. He said, "I don't think beginners could generally dissect chords like this." And I thought to myself, that's a really interesting point. When I was younger, I probably would not have been able to dissect those chords either. It wasn't until I took theory classes and studied music in college and took classes in high school and everything started to make sense. But I feel that I was really set back because I waited so long to study theory like that. Wouldn't it have been better if I started to realize some of these patterns early on? So I thought I would take a beginner book called Easy Classics to Moderns. This is by Music for Millions series, and it's a great series. They have easy, these are all the books on the back. It's easy, more easy, then early advanced, and they go through all the difficulties, but this is the easiest version. We're gonna take a very straightforward piece by Beethoven. It's called Ecossaise in G. The point I'm trying to make is I wish someone would have at least pointed out this is what's happening here and this is what's happening here. Even if I didn't get the whole picture, if I had just realized that there are certain chords here and certain chords there, and that's why this sounds pretty, that would have been really helpful for me when I was starting my piano journey, and I wouldn't have relied on muscle memory for so many years. I wish someone would have just said, hey, there's actually some method to the madness in this piece. So let's jump in. First, I'm going to just look through the piece a little bit and I'll show you that process. Then we're going to go to the piano and then we're going to try to understand our piece a little bit better. Let's jump in. Alright, so I'm going to just start analyzing this piece, but I'm going to really make it basic. What's the key signature? It could either be G major or E minor. So how do we decide if it's a major or a minor piece? Well, let's look at the first note. I see a G right here. And then at the end of the piece, I also see another G. So I definitely know this is probably going to be in G major. Also, I see a lot of G major chords. So check this out. Let's look at the first measure, and this measure right here, I'm going to see this is a G, this is a B, and this is a D. Just looking at the left hand, I can say my left hand is playing a G major chord. It's just broken up. I'm not even going to worry about what's in my right hand. Let's look at the second measure. I see a D, an A, and a C. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with seventh chords, but if you are familiar, I can recognize this as a D, missing the F sharp, an A, and a C. If we look at the right hand, here's my F sharp right there. I'm going to label this as a D7. Then we look at the third measure. It's another D, another F sharp, and a C. I'm going to label that as a D7. And then we get to our fourth measure. I see we're back to G, and then we see a CD. That's a little weird. It's called a suspension chord, and that C is the fourth note. And that fourth note resolves to a G, B, D at the last eighth note. So I'm just gonna, and if you didn't know all that, you can just see we're going back to a G, and then we see that B, D at the end. So just looking at the left hand, we go from G major, maybe you didn't even know that seventh, but I see a D. So I see a G, the first eighth note is a G. Second measure, the first and eighth note is a D. Third measure, the first eighth note is a D. And the fourth measure, the first eighth note is a G. So by just first glance, I can see we're doing G, D, D, G. Now, remember when we looked at the key signature and it said we were in G major? Well, if we think of a G major scale, and I play G major scale, if I play G major scale, what is G in the G major scale? It's the first note. What is D in the G major scale? It's the fifth note. So I see I have a 1 to 5 to 5 1-to-1 relationship. Just seeing which note of the scale am I playing. And if we build a chord off of that G, it's a 1 chord, G major, going to a 5 with the 7th chord, and then back to a G. This is really basic. We're just doing a 1 to a 5 to a 5 to a 1. And if you want to get more advanced, that's a tonic to a dominant, back to a tonic. Let's look at the second line. Just looking at the left hand, I see another G chord. Then I see a D chord again, a D chord, and it cadences or finishes in G. This is really basic. So far, we've only seen 2 chords. All right. Let's look after this little repeat sign. So it looks like we're going to repeat. This is a little bit of introduction to form. So we would repeat that first intro and then we'd move on to the next part. All right, we have the same little pickup thing that we had earlier. Now let's just look at the left hand again. The easiest way to identify chords, just look at the left hand. So I see a D going to an octave D, then I see an F sharp going to an F sharp, A to A, D to D. Well, do you know what D, F sharp, A is? Sorry. That's another D chord, but it's not in the same way it was written earlier, right? Now it's arpeggiated, right? It's going D, D, F sharp, A, D, D. Then it does it again, D, D, F sharp, A, D, D. So we already got that. That's a 5 chord, right? So that's the fifth note of the G major scale. If you want to get fancy, you can call it the 5th scale degree. But we're not going fancy. So I'm just going to label that as a D harmony, just a D chord. Okay, and let's look at maybe the right hand. It's just doing scalar stuff. It's just going up and down, probably having chord tones of that D harmony, right? Let's look at this measure right here. This is F sharp, D, A, C. Do you recognize that? It's just an inversion or a different way you can write a D chord. It's just a little mix match. They're trying to play with your brain if you're a beginner, right? There's many different ways you can write one chord, and that's through inversions. So you can do this way, or this way, or this way, or this way. You can stack it however you want, as long as you use D, F sharp, A, and that 7th, which is the C. Okay, then he goes to a G. So it's D7, D7, G. All right, let's look at the left hand here. This is a C going to a C. What's in the right hand? I see an E and a G. How can we write C, E, G? That's a C major chord. That's like the first time we've seen a different chord in this whole piece. Well, what's a C chord in the relationship of a G major scale? Well, let's say the letters of the G major scale. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Which number was C? G, A, B, C. It was the 4th scale degree. So I can label this as a 4 chord. If you don't want to do all that, you can just label it as a C major chord. Okay, let's keep going. I see D, F sharp, and C. What is that? You already know. It's a D7 chord. And then we cadence or finish in G again. Let's keep going. It looks like after this repeat sign, so it looks like it'll be repeating that middle section. And then we go on. Here's our G major triad. Here's our D7, our G sus4. Just think of it as a G if you don't want to know about suspension. And then it keeps going G major, D7, D7, and cadences in G. All right, that's the basic chord map of this piece. Really easy. So far, how many chords did we see? We only saw G major, D7, and we also saw a C major chord. So if we had to really think deep, what are the 3 chords in the G major scale? We used a G, then we used C, then we used D. We used the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord. And that 5 chord had a 7th scale degree. So it was a 5/7. If you want to get more technical, this is also known as the tonic chord, the subdominant, and the dominant 7th chord. Let's play it. Alright, let me tell you some ways I would suggest practicing through this piece if you were a beginner. Step 1, I'd play the left hand separately. Do that over and over because that intro, you're going to repeat that even at the end. So you might as well get it down and really get it clean. Maybe if you're a beginner, you might have trouble getting your pinky from that G to the other D. Also, you can clump chords. You can play just the G major to the D7, to the D7, to the G sus, and resolve. Then I would also practice this last measure right here a couple times. It might be a little tricky to get your 2 onto that D at the end. Oops, sorry. Let's talk about the right hand. It might be tricky to get all of those different moves with the hands. Crossover, and then here's a big leap. I would practice that a couple times. Because generally, if your 2 is on the F sharp, you might not want to put your 5 on that E. It's a big leap. It's a leap of a 7th. So you would practice that a couple times. And then you'd keep going. And make sure you land on G. I'd drill this a couple times, just like I did in my previous videos. Make sure you get all your articulations correct with your staccatos, and make sure you also accent where it says to accent right here. Let's move on to the middle section. I would drill the D major arpeggio. Yeah, see, that's tricky. Yeah, I would do this. I would just go back and forth. Then I would do it in octaves. Look at the right hand. That's pretty easy. It's just stepping up and down. This part is tricky because you have to go from here and change to 2/4 to connect. I would practice that a bit. 1/3 to 2/4. those slurs might cause you some issues, so I'd practice that. But that's about it. Let's see. Oh, yeah, that's a hard part right there. And then it goes back to the beginning. So this piece is pretty straightforward. If you have any questions, any further questions that I probably didn't address in this video, I can maybe answer some of your questions in the comments. Just let me know. I don't know what else I should address. I think I pretty much covered everything. So let's jump back. So I hope you guys enjoyed that breakdown of a seemingly complex piece that sounds more complicated than it really is. Made for beginners, it only had 3 chords, G major, C major, and D major. Please let me know if you have any more questions. I love to read your comments. They're so fun. And your comments are the reason I made this video. So please like, subscribe, leave comments, and I'll see you guys in the next video.